You're listening to the Made for More Ministries podcast, where today we're going to talk about what the Bible teaches about strengthening your marriage through faith. And if you're not married, I want to encourage you because this is marriage or relationships and communication in general through our faith. And I believe that every person can get something out of this because most importantly, it has to do with communication. So in aspects of marriage, this is a very key component to having a successful and happy marriage, not a miserable marriage, but this goes for every relationship that we have with our coworkers, with our family members. So I encourage you to tune in even if you are not married, because we all are in relationship with people in this earth. But most specifically, so marriage is a gift from God, but it's also something that we have to be intentional about. And I almost want to replace the word marriage with relationships. So just hear me out here. The way we communicate with our spouse, with coworkers, with family members, it can either strengthen our relationship or weaken it. Good communication isn't just about talking. It's about listening, understanding, and being willing to work together, even when things are hard. And that's the key word, be willing. So today I want to talk about what the Bible teaches about communication and specifically in marriage, how faith plays a role in strengthening our relationships, and why having a willing heart is essential for keeping your marriage healthy and any relationships healthy. So with communication in marriage, why does this matter? God designed marriage to be a reflection of his love, a relationship built on unity and trust and selflessness. But communication is often where couples are going to struggle the most because misunderstandings are going to happen, feelings are going to get hurt, and then that turns into maybe some bitterness, which turns into actions of bitterness towards each other, which then causes reactions, and we assume our spouse should just know what we need. I'm probably speaking to the ladies on that one. Maybe it's stress and work and kids, daily life. They all get in the way of being able to have deep conversations. But the Bible tells us in Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Our words matter. What we say and how we say it, it has the power to either build up our spouse or tear them down. This is why being intentional about communication is so important. It's not just about fixing our problems, it's about making sure that the way we speak to each other reflects God's love. So the role of faith in marriage communication or, relational communication, it's not just a human relationship. It is a spiritual covenant. When God is at the center of your marriage, he becomes your source of strength and patience and wisdom. In Ecclesiastes 4:12, it says, though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. That third strand is God. When you invite him into your marriage, your communication is no longer just about fixing problems, but about growing together in faith. Marriage was designed by God to be a sacred covenant, not just a legal agreement or an emotional bond. From the very beginning in Genesis, we see that God created marriage to reflect his divine nature and purpose. In Genesis 2:24, it tells us, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. This one flesh union is more than just physical intimacy. It represents a deep spiritual, emotional, and relational bond that mirrors God's unity and love. At its core, marriage is meant to reflect the relationship between Christ and the church. In Ephesians 5:25 through 27, it makes this connection clear. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. This kind of love is sacrificial, unconditional, and steadfast. It's not based on fleeting feelings or convenience, whether you've had a good day. It's rooted in a commitment and grace. In the same way that Christ pursues and forgives and cherishes his bride, which is the church, a husband is called to love his wife with that same selflessness. Likewise, wives are called to honor and respect their husbands as the church submits to Christ, not as a sign of inferiority, but as a demonstration of unity and trust and love. And for all of this, any part of this can be challenging for us. Some may be too reliant, or to lean too much on your spouse. Some maybe don't lean on them enough, or respect them or honor them enough. And how do you find that right balance between loving Jesus and seeking God first, but respecting and loving your spouse? So marriage then becomes a living example of the gospel. It teaches us to serve. It teaches us to forgive, to be patient, and to just love unconditionally. There shouldn't be conditions. It's not about perfection, but about two imperfect people learning to love more like Christ every day. And don't get me wrong, there's a time and a place where a marriage needs to part ways in certain very specific scenarios. But in essence, in the process of our marriage, we grow closer, not just to each other, but we grow closer to God. As we learn to put each other first, communicate with honesty, and rely on God for strength, our relationship becomes a spiritual journey, a refining process that draws both of us closer to God's heart, as he is that third strand in that rope. Marriage also teaches us dependence. Just as we rely on God's strength in our spiritual walk, we must rely on him to guide and sustain our marriages. There will be seasons of joy and seasons of trial, but through it all, God remains the anchor. When a couple invites God into the center of their marriage, they experience a deeper level of connection and purpose and peace. He becomes the foundation on which everything else is built. God uses marriage to reveal more of himself to us. When we love our spouse sacrificially, we get a glimpse of his relentless love. When we offer grace, we understand his mercy just a little bit more. When we commit to covenant, even when it's hard and it sucks and we don't like them, we reflect his faithfulness. Marriage is not meant to be easy. It's meant to be holy. And in its holiness, it becomes one of the most powerful ways to understand the love of God and to live it out daily. So here's some practical ways I want to share with you, ways that we can strengthen this communication through our faith. Number one, pray together. Before difficult conversations, before bed, before major decisions, invite God into your marriage daily. 2, read scripture together. Find verses that encourage you to love each other like Christ loves the church. 3, seek wisdom from godly couples. Marriage was never meant to be done alone. Lean on people who share the biblical wisdom and foundation that you can rely on. And when you allow faith to shape your communication, you start to see your spouse the way God sees them, with love and grace and patience. And I know that this is not an easy journey. It's harder more often than it is fun and pleasant. But we have to have a power of a willing heart in marriage. One of the biggest keys to a healthy marriage is the willingness to listen, to admit when we're wrong, to put our spouse's needs before our own, the willingness to work through problems instead of just avoiding them and pushing them under the rug. In Philippians 2, 3, and 4, it says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others." A willing heart is a humble heart. It means recognizing that marriage isn't about winning arguments. It's about loving your spouse the way Christ loves us. So I just want to ask you to ask yourself, am I willing to listen without interrupting? Am I willing to speak with kindness, even when I'm frustrated? Am I willing to seek understanding rather than trying to prove a point? Am I willing to pray for my spouse instead of just complaining about them? A willing attitude can completely shift the way that you communicate. Instead of seeing conversations as battles to be won, you start seeing them as opportunities to grow together. So I just want to share with you a few things that I challenge you with. First of all, speak with love, even when you disagree. Speak love and speak life. Disagreements are a part of every marriage. You're not the only one, but the way that you handle them is what matters. In Proverbs 15:1, it says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." If your words are filled with kindness and understanding, conversations become constructive instead of destructive. So maybe instead of saying, "You never listened to me," say, "I feel unheard when this happens. Can we talk about it?" And listen more than you speak. Sometimes the best way to communicate is to just stop talking and just truly listen. In James 1:19, it says, "Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." Listening doesn't just mean waiting for your turn to talk. It means hearing your spouse's heart behind their words. So maybe next time your spouse is speaking, repeat back what you heard to make sure that you understand it before responding. I have done this in so many different conversations and relationships, with personal relationships, with my clients. And when I can repeat back what I think I'm hearing, it is such an incredible way to not only make them realize that you are hearing and processing what they're saying, but sometimes it clears up the miscommunication. No, actually, I was thinking more of this, not what you repeated back. And it's such a cool way to communicate with people. And choose unity over pride. Pride can destroy communication. It makes us defensive, unwilling to admit when we're wrong, and more focused on winning than finding a solution. Ephesians 4:2-3 says, "Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." If your goal is unity, not proving a point, your conversations with anybody will be so much healthier. So maybe before responding in frustration, and this is something I have worked on for years, and so glad when I act it out and I'm successful. Before responding in your frustration, ask yourself, will this bring us closer together or push us further apart? Like, how productive is this going to be? How productive is this statement going to be? And also another way to look at it is, am I giving life? Am I speaking life-giving words, or am I speaking words that lead to death or negativity? Life and death versus, like positive and negative. If it's negative, it's not life-giving. And we need to make time for meaningful conversations. Life gets busy. And sometimes the only conversations that we have with our spouse are about bills and schedules and responsibilities. But if you want to strengthen your marriage, you need intentional time to connect. Maybe it's setting aside at least one night a week for uninterrupted conversation over a dinner, during a walk, or before bed. There has been times where I have had to almost put it in the calendar like it's an appointment, just like any other client of mine for work, that this time is when we are going to go do this, because we have to make sure that it's a priority. And there is a direct correlation with the intimate connection that we have in our marriage when we make that a priority. Even if life is busy, if we feel like, we feel bad for leaving our daughter somewhere so that we can spend this time together, and we feel guilty because she feels like she's missing out, we have to make it a priority, because we need to be a unit. We have to be a team in this life, and God designed it that way. So my last little encouragement is this: love like Christ loves. At the end of the day, marriage is about love, not just the emotional kind, but the deep, committed, sacrificial love that Jesus showed us. In Ephesians 5:25, it says, "Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her." When Christ is at the center of your marriage, your communication reflects his love, his patience, and his grace. So today, just ask yourself, am I inviting God into my marriage daily? Am I choosing to have a willing attitude in my communication? And am I making my marriage a priority? Because when we love like Christ and listen with humility and communicate with kindness, our marriages grow into the beautiful, God-honoring relationships that they were meant to be. So I hope today's episode has encouraged you to be intentional about communication in your marriage and all of your relationships. And if this message spoke to you, maybe share it with a friend who could use the same encouragement. And until next time, keep loving and listening and keep putting God at the center of your marriage, because that is the key to a relationship that lasts. God bless you.